Good morning. Good vibes, thank you. Let's keep that up. How are you all doing today? Pretty good, awesome. All right, hi Pops. I don't see him around, but thank you for helping set this up with Cam, and thanks Nicole, doing fantastic job for the testing community. Yeah, next time I hope to see you around the little baby, hopefully. Thank you. All right, let's start for today. I wanted to start with making a little confession to you. But before that, I wanted you to make a little confession with me, if that's okay. A quick show of hands, if you ever felt knee-deep working with a test automation framework, striving to create that stable and resilient test scripts. Cool. So true to words by Cam. We are all engineers, right? So starting the day with a clean code. It's good to see quite a few hands up. The next one I would like to ask is, have you ever felt working with test automation framework that is already created by someone that you fiddle working with around but not knowing way around? Wow, I see the excitement. Amazing. This is cool. Well, there are a few intimidating questions that I want to ask you, right? So I want to put through this to have a good food for thought for you. Is your test automation prepared for major application changes without existing rework, right? And when did your last review your test code for duplications and inefficiencies? Does your testing practices contribute to code cleanliness or add complexity? Have outdated tests caused false results? How intimidating these questions are, right? So why do you do this, Manoj, on the very morning of testing talks? Well, I want to bring up these questions to have that food for thought about working with test automation. And my real confession is this talk is not just a summary of the book called Clean Coding Practices, so you could relax a bit, because that anyone can do it at their work or whenever they get fine time. So this talk is all about my personal experience working with a lot of automation frameworks in the past, being a consultant myself, been an open source contributor in the past. I've elevated a lot of teams write good code from test automation with best practices. So this talk is all about culling in best practices from all this, and I hopefully will give you a good food for thought around it, right? So one of the things that I want to clarify is about perceptions. So perceptions is the main thing that shapes or defines us, how we perceive things. So American psychologist Virginia Satir, so she says we must not allow other people's limited perceptions to define us. How many of you agree with this? Amazing. It's quite true, isn't it? Because we hear a lot of things about it. So at Sydney Testing Talks, I gave a talk around state of browser automation in JavaScript, where I gave a talk about a lot of things around test automation frameworks. Right now we have various different frameworks, people getting confused. Hey, Cypress is cool, Selenium is cool, Playwright is cool, but which one do you want to go with? So a lot of confusions around it, right? So do check it out. The slides are available. I'm sure you could reach out to Cam as well to get those things. So what does this has to do with the testing or clean coding, right? So I couldn't get a better picture other than bringing up the katana. I'm sure most of you heard about it. It's from the Japanese heritage, known for its craftsmanship. You can see how the swordsmith is building up, the katana itself. It's known for its precision, the time it takes to build the sword. It's amazing, and it's one of the best swords out there in the world. You can get it. When I was actually searching for an image, there was actually a Google question that was coming up. Is it legally allowed to have katana in Australia? Well, the answer was yes. So possibly you could have that as a symbol of things. So now what does katana have to do with the clean code in testing? Well, as I said, when it comes to craftsmanship, the best thing I could bring up is this one in the real world, right? So, but in digital world, what are the things that we are actually creating to shape up our applications, which is nothing but quality code, right? So the automation scripts that we write are the ones that we should look forward to bring in with that level of craftsmanship, and that's what this talk is going to be all about. So the agenda for today, we're split into 4 parts. When I was thinking about how do I put this up, because I don't want to this talk looked like a summary of, the clean code book, but how do I think about it? So thanks to ChatGPT, so I'll be very honest, and this is one of the confessions. So I asked ChatGPT, like, I have this idea, how do I put it together? And this is what it said. So I believe this one would be, making sense for you all. And I think it makes sense because optimizing for test automation, there are 4 different steps that will each and every one of you will be involved with, right? So one is about test authoring, and then maintenance, of course, because the UI changes a lot of times, and of course we wanted to maintain that. And review, like I don't know how many of you review, I'll talk about it. And so it's about the code review process that developers have, and it's the same with the test code review as well. And then lastly with the test execution, right? And that's typically what. So I have test authoring, test review, execution, and test maintenance. So read that as test code or test script. So it will make sense to you. So I just kept it short, meaning test authoring and executions. So first up, test authoring, it's the foundation of test automation, isn't it? Where quality tests are created. It's very important because it'll help you streamline the test execution. You're bringing up the faster feedback for you. And that's what we really write automation code, right? So how many of you, let me ask this question, let's make it a little interactive. Is test automation same as continuous testing? How many of you say yes? Did you raise your hand or just put it down? You're not a tester? Okay, cool. What role do you play?
I'm a
Developer, oh, fantastic. Cool, we have a developer here. Right. Sorry, but I couldn't still get out of it, but thank you. Thank you for making it here, representing the entire developer community. So, and hopefully you could pass this back. Usually I say, hopefully this food for thought, take it back to your workplace and have a better quality practice, but yeah, thanks for coming. Anyway, test automation is not the same as continuous testing. That's what I was coming to say, right? So I'll touch upon a bit because test automation will help you get up to continuous testing, but it's not quite the same. But strategies, so I want to bring up some of the strategies one by one. First one is the descriptive and meaningful test case, which is called as the single responsibility principle. Well, there will be a little bit of things that are pulled in from clean code book because these are principles that still make sense to put it together, because not everything that we do in development world for clean code will actually fit in with test code, because what we do in test scripts is a lot different than what it is built. So coding for development is more of building things, but testing automation is more of validating whether the built things are right or wrong, right? That's what automation is all about. So descriptive and meaningful test case names, and small functions and modularizations, and we have fast feedback loops, and that's what test authoring is all about, and we create such fast feedback loops so that we are continuously delivering things, and the campsite rule, and we have use TTD. So these are some of the strategies that could help you follow or define the best practices for your automation, test automation, right? So let's double click into each of this and we'll see what this means. Descriptive and meaningful test case names. So if anyone asks my name, I wouldn't say, hey, I'm a brown person from India, all the way up here giving my talk, isn't it? So that'll be quite, yeah. So this is some of the things that you should learn about whenever you're naming things, either in test automation framework or test case. I would rather say, hey, my name is Manoj and I work at Lambda Test and I'm here to deliver this talk. That makes more meaningful, right? That's what your test method should say, right? It shouldn't be like, I've seen where people give, like for example, there is a script for login. So people used to write login with username admin, login with username test1, test2. So these are method names that I've seen. I shouldn't be asking how many of you would write that, because I know absolutely no one would agree to it. But I know we all did it at some phase, right? So think of something called a Swiss Army knife and a specific tool set. So there are difference between these two, right? So Swiss Army knife, when you have Swiss Army knife, you do a lot of things with that. It gives you a lot of options to do. But when you have a specialized tool, it is meant for one thing, but it can only deliver what it's meant for. Like for example, take a nail cutter. It'll help you clip your nails. And Susami knife, yeah, we can actually shape it up if you wanted to, scratch someone. But anyway, it's a bad joke, and I should become better at making some jokes. But yeah, it still makes sense in this context because single responsibility principle. So whatever script that you're making that follows with the method, it should allow you to define only one thing at a moment, just like how the name is all about, right? So it should be concise, it should be human readable, it should only represent the single modular function that you're trying to write. And although it also makes tests reusable. And yeah, a few more things for you to take a look at. A single class should have only one responsibility. I shouldn't be having one Java class, for example, or one JavaScript file in my test automation framework that represents all the pages of, like for example, you take Amazon, and I shouldn't be having a page, like we all heard about page object pattern. I'm going to cover a little bit about that. I have my personal opinions about it. It works and it will not work, but at a large scale, if you see, people tend to write all the pages in one class, and that shouldn't be the case, right? So whenever you're faced with any application for that matter, you could try and segregate it based on what your functionality and the domain means, but nothing more about putting it all together in one class. That doesn't make sense at all. Small functions and modularizations. So this is very interesting because think of Lego. It's quite interesting, right? If you have a large Lego set, last time I believe we gave Lego set, I don't remember, but I'm sure most of you would have played with Lego. Legos are nothing but small pieces that you put together and you have a beautiful toy that you always aimed for, right? And that's what small functions and modularization means. And nowadays we have monolith applications. We had monolith applications and we have microservices now. And the reason for moving into microservices or more into having teams working independently with contracts, producers and consumers. I think the next talk is all about that. I would let Lewis to talk about it. Wonderful tool packed, but I'll talk about it at a high level on the functions, right? So promote writing short focus functions and modularizing test code, and that's what I mean by small functions and modularizations. So how many of you wrote a function that does 2 or 3 things in a method? Okay, quite a few. Do you think that is right? For those of you who didn't raise the hands, putting you on the spot, huh? Well, the answer is depends. I wouldn't say it's yes or no. The answer is depends because I work for ThoughtWorks, and the best answer that you'll get from a thought worker is depends because they are consultants, and I've done that myself. It's a good thing, and they love it when we hear about that. So, but the idea of the function is all about making it as small as possible. That doesn't mean that you should be making your functions as granular as, making it one function, callable, reusable function for login itself. Like for example, I've seen in a test code, hey, I follow clean code practices. And for a login script, I saw there was one method for username and one method for password. How crazy is that? I could imagine every field in that page was having its own method. Well, it's quite arguable there, but I believe we don't have to go to that deep level of modularizing codes, right? It's quite crazy. So I would leave upon on this message saying, it depends. Think about what works for your domain and promote writing small functions that will work for you. The next one is fast feedback loops. This will be quite interesting because we write test automation for fast feedback loops. How many of you agree with that? Automation for fast feedback loop. So think of this as a video game controller. How many of you play video games? Oh yeah, I can see laughs. Cool. I had the same smile when I was, this is great, this is a great example. So for those of you who are gaming enthusiasts, they would know how much they research about getting a monitor. Because you need to get a monitor, they wouldn't do the same level of research when they're buying a TV or something else, right? Like maybe it's men usually, finding something else for the wife or, for the girlfriend. It's not usually quite the same case, right? Like we research a lot. I research myself a lot to, find a monitor that has the quickest response time with less gigahertz, 1.6, 1.4, 1.2. We have so many, ultra wide monitors in various varieties. I don't want to go deep because I can talk about that for a whole day or something. So if you're fancy gaming, you can talk about that to me apart from Selenium, which I'm known for. But yeah, coming to the actual point. So fast feedback loops. So think of fast feedback loops, how your test code. So next time when you write a test script for an actual test case, which will help you give the fast feedback, think about a video game controller and the response time that we look forward to see in the monitor, right? It's all about action and an effect and the feedback that you get. And we should write our tests to enable fast feedback, as I mentioned. Use models. Like we work day to day at enterprise applications at many things, right? So having some sort of model would really help you. I'm not here to talk about different set of models, but there are multiple models available. Just like how t-shirt sizes, right? I mean, it's quite crazy, the world is going. So there is pyramid, which we all known for, there is trophy, there is diamond, there is Swiss cheese model. There are a lot of these things, right? I mean, I see some smiles for cheese, but yeah, let's try to taste that a little later. So how many of you use a model that is other than test pyramid? That'll be quite interesting to ask, because I wanted to find that myself. Have you heard about diamond or trophy model? Oh, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I can spend a quick minute on that. So pyramid is all about you have unit integration and then contract and then end-to-end test. That's what about the pyramid. But when you talk about the diamond, we can talk. You can make a mention like something like this, where the majority of the time will spent in the integration testing. So you can draw one small triangle on the diamond, up and down, and then one in the up. With up is usually the end-to-end case, and the down one will be more of the unit test. And the majority of the time is spent in the integration test, and that's what the component test. From a UI side, something like Storybook will be put in together. From a backend side, a lot of microservices testing will come into picture. So you could think about it. Not always test pyramid works for everyone. So you can always think about, maybe you might not know, if you go back and look at the percentage of tests that you've written, you might already be using that model. So Ken C. Dodds, who is very well known in the UI front-end space, you can go check about testingjavascript.com. I hope I got it right, but you can check that out, Ken C. Dodds, testingjavascript.com. So he has defined this model about trophy. You can go check it out. So yeah, use models, test pyramid, trophy, or whatever works for you. And just remember that the test code that we are writing is only for fast feedback loops, nothing else. How many of you love camping? Yay, cool. Well, it's quite unusual for me because I'm not used to camping.
I talk about camping in games or camping in reality?
Oh, wow, we have a game enthusiast. I'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, in real life. Camping? Yes. So for most of you raise your hands, they will know about campsite rule, right? So if you're setting up your camp, you will of course keep it at a place that is quite neat and pleasant, right? And the general thumb of rule is to leave the same when you go. And that's what clean code practices also mean for test automation, right? So, and that's what I wanted to say. Always leave the code base in a better state than you found. So if a lot of you raise your hands excitingly saying, yeah, I was in that position where I was fiddling with code or automation framework that someone else written. So for those of you who raise those hands, so I would request you or recommend you to follow a campsite rule. Try to make it better, because end of the day you're working for betterment of your application, and why not we help that follow the campsite rule. And the next one is use test-driven development. So here I didn't get an exciting one, but at least this is cool. So imagine TDD as a jigsaw puzzle, right? So how we have a target, we know what we're trying to achieve, and then we have the small pieces. I'm sure all of you would have tried to fit in with one and then remove it, it doesn't fit, and I'll put it other. Okay, this doesn't fit, I'll take another one and piece. And yeah, this works, and that's cool. So that's what TDD is also all about. So in this case, So it's a practice that you write a failing test, and then you make the test pass, and then you refactor and the loop goes on. And that's what, this step is all about. And the last step of TDD is refactoring, reducing the duplication, aligning with the campsite rule. So in a way, campsite rule will eventually lead you into TDD as well. So TDD, again, it offers advantage of defining clear expectations and requirements, but I have a different slide about refactoring. I'll talk about it, but that's in general, right? But I hope this gave you good insights about test authoring itself, right? And next up, I want to move into test maintenance, the most interesting part, because we never look back, right? Yeah, I wrote my test script. We struggle a lot in writing an automation. I don't know how many of you follow in-sprint automation or struggling to get automation done within a sprint. Most of you, right? Yeah, thanks for agreeing. It's not quite possible, and I'm here to talk about clean code, right? Which is quite unusual. Oh, Manoj, we struggle to write automation code in a sprint, and you're here talking about following best practices. Well, of course, we have to because it's part of our job. So ensuring test automation remains relevant and effective over time. And the importance and why we need it, because we want to prevent the false positives and negatives because the UI keeps changing. Service is not much though, but at least it will give you more details than we expect. So some of the strategies, version control. I want to talk about the trunk-based development, which is quite easy and very nice, and CI/CD and design patterns, and then refactoring and dry. The foundation for efficient test maintenance is to follow some sort of version controlling. You could use whatever method that works for you. In my consulting experience, I've found trunk-based development the most easy. But again, trunk-based development would not work in cases where you have a large enterprise with mono-repo, or you have an open source repository like Selenium. TBD, it works. So the guy who can check it out, trunkbaseddevelopment.com, Paul Hammond. He was also one of the original authors who developed Selenium, who was an ex-thought worker, and he was the one who preached about trunk-based development. So you can go and check it out. So you will find a new role called release train engineer. I was very surprised 3 years back. Like, we have new fancy titles, right? Like the coach, as Cam mentioned. So we have now release train engineer, DevOps engineer. DevOps engineer is quite natural, and we know what the role does. But release train engineer was quite fancying to me. When I look up to LinkedIn job descriptions, I couldn't find any difference between what a site reliability engineer or a DevOps engineer would do. I found it's a role in between those. I quite still not figuring out. So if you at your company has anyone with that role, I would like to speak to you and understand much better about what that means. But efficiently, those are the guys that I heard are responsible for making releases and maintaining the whole process or design about how do you short-lived branches or feature branch, coding behind a flag, those things comes into picture. So use version control. That's the first advice. And the second one is continuous integration. So how many of you here know what is your path to production? I know some of you might be feeling, oh, if I don't raise my hand, this guy is going to make a fun of me. But yeah, it's quite okay to not know about it. You had a question? Or?
No, but I know about it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Now you're on the spotlight. So, right. So path to production, if you don't know about it, it's okay. You can go and, at least now you can go and think about it. So I usually show a good flow chart completely about what a flow of path to production looks like. From a concept to development to testing everywhere, and then to deployment to disaster recovery, right? And that's what path to production typically looks like. And if you know and very clear about your path to production, everything will make it easy. Your test automation will help you deliver that fast feedback, and implicitly it'll help you, long run to do continuous delivery and deployment. How many of you know difference between continuous delivery and deployment? Okay, I don't want to talk about it, but anyway, just quickly checking. And the next up is the design pattern. We have a lot of them, right? So we have a lot of them. I don't want to again ask questions because it's too much questions already, isn't it? But I'll keep that because I like it that way. Because we're talking about coding and I don't want people yawning. So far it's good. I haven't seen anyone yawning, which is good. But the only design pattern that we have heard in test automation world is page object pattern. Yeah. So it's good. I think Anand Bagmar, my good friend, he has his own talk called Perils of Page Object Pattern. He calls it that way, and it's a quite interesting talk. You should go listen to it. I'm not saying it's bad. Yeah, it's definitely good. How many of you know Page Factory in the Selenium world, if you're used to writing Selenium script? Yeah, quite a few. Cool. So Simon Stewart, the creator of WebDriver, told Page Factory could be the terrible idea that I ever developed. And it's terrible, to be very honest, and you should go check out. We had it in the initial code base, and we don't have it now. It's deprecated, so don't use that. But that's where the page object pattern comes into picture. Well, my advice is to look forward to more than the page object pattern. Page object pattern will definitely help you. You could model your pages, based on how, if your application is like, for example, any banks, Commonwealth Bank, NAB, ANZ, or Amazon, e-commerce, or any website you take, a page in the web application will essentially become its own class in the Java world, right? And that's how it ticks. But not necessarily that way. If the web page is large enough, like for example, Amazon, which makes it easy to explain because you have search functionality, you have product display, you have various menu like hamburger menu. So hamburger menu itself can become its own page, right? So think about it. If you're already having a test automation framework, I'm sure most of you have, and if you're following page object pattern, and go and map all your Java classes in the page object, like pages, basically, that's how you would save it. So is my pages have a one-to-one mapping in my web application? If yes, then you might be doing it wrong. So go and change and make it a little bit flexible. So as I said, there are different things. So business layer page object, as Anand calls it, which is most likely the page object, but with a different idea in mind. So factory design pattern, facade design pattern, singleton, fluent page object. There are multiple things to look forward. So if this is something that interesting, maybe I can present it in the next testing talks. Cam is hearing about it, so how nice of me to reserve a talk slot for the next one. But anyway, so if this is interesting, definitely, I can talk about it for a whole day or as a workshop or a talk, but think about it. Page object pattern is not the only one. There are multiple design patterns to look forward. Refactoring and DRY. It's quite funny, isn't it? We try to refactor something and we end up with the same thing. Especially in the test automation framework when it's built by others, right? So usually what happens is, hey, this is a great framework, let's use Cypress. Let's use Playwright. And then the guy moves to the other company and no one in the same team would know what the heck does. How many of you have faced that situation? Yeah, it's a terrible situation to be in, right? Because you don't know what those framework does unless and until you're part of it, right? And most of them will not follow the DRY principle. And that's the case that I've seen. As I said, this talk is from my experiencing a lot of those test automation frameworks, and this is one of those, and makes it quite tough to look at how they have modeled the entire automation framework. So one of the cornerstones in clean code is all about refactoring and DRY, which is don't repeat yourself, which is one of the very main things in clean code, which is also mentioned in the clean code book, but you could think about it. And the next thing is, again, as I mentioned, I had a slide, and true to my words, here is a slide that talks about refactor versus rewrite. So again, we can talk about it for a whole day, but I'll just leave it here with the definition as a food for thought. You can think about it. Refactor is all about when you want to improve the code quality without changing its whole functionality. It's called refactor. Rewrite when you feel like, yeah, this doesn't make sense to me. I'll sit up and rewrite. Like we could see this the most in the development world. I can see he's scratching his head, but I've been in situations where people were excited when Angular came up, and they said, yeah, let's try Angular front end, it works. And then when React came, they immediately jumped into React. I'm sure most of you, would face the situation, and poor fellow testers, they would have done protractor for Angular, and the same script would not work for React, right? So I've been in that situation. I know I can see people smiling, but yeah, I hear you. I've been in that shoes, and it's quite terrible. So that's where the rewrite comes into picture, where absolutely it doesn't make sense. Your test automation framework shouldn't be in that case, but rather it should be in a more reusable format. So with that, I will slowly move into test review, ensuring the integrity and effectiveness of the test script. And it tries to identify issues early in the test automation phases. Yeah, this one I added up quickly just before setting up my HDMI cable. We as a quality engineers look for application quality. And this talk is all about code quality. And that's what we are learning about, right? Because we write test automation to give that fast feedback loops. But if we advocate for quality, and if you're not looking up to the code that we write is quality or not, then we must be doing something wrong, right? And that's what this talk is all about. So when you look at code metrics, especially during the review time, so the only metric that can be defined is only the WTFs. And that is very true, because in any code review session, you will see there will be a so-called guru in a team who will say, yeah, this doesn't work and this is how it should be. And then you spend the whole time working on it. You have a slippage, the velocity increases, you go into the next sprint, a lot of things that happen. But yeah, which is true, because there is, as I mentioned, perception. So there is a good code, there is a bad code, and there is a difference, right? And that's what it means. So strategies again, code smells, effective comments and documentations, law of Demeter, and code review. So these are some of the strategies that I wanted you to think about it. And again, as a practice, let's double click into it. I'll quickly rush through because I just heard we have like last 5-6 minutes to wrap up. So code smells, right? So code smells are the first things that you could find it. I'm sure this is a famous meme that anyone would think about, right? So you will find code smells in your test automation framework when you have a class that has a lot of functions, but it's not talking to that class and talking to someone else, right? It's more about being true and loyal to your wife or girlfriend, right? So that's how things go. So that's something that we should definitely look forward. Have you come across any code smells in your automation framework? Any quick answers? When you hear the term code smell, what is one thing that comes to your mind? Sorry? Sonar cube. Okay. So we're getting into the tooling aspect now. Okay. So not about the tools, but yeah, I've looked at this code. I don't know what it does. So that's one of the code smells itself, right? But again, it's a perception. Like, you don't know Java, so if you look into it, of course, you will think it as a code smell. But it's not all about it, right? For example, excessive comments. Those are some of the things. For example, I asked ChatGPT to get, okay, I'll have a different slide that I talk on to you. But one thing that I want to show here is the smell introduced. It's a loop again that comes with it. So you refactor it and you discard it, and that's a simple thing to look forward to it. So quick examples, as I mentioned, large comments, like unnecessary comments, like you don't need to write an essay about what that function does. And then large or complex methods, incomplete error handling. So these are some of the things that you can look forward to finding code smells in your automation framework. So effective comments and documentation, as I mentioned, I just spoke about large comments, and then I have a good practice about effective comments. So is that quite contradictory? Actually, no, because comments is really necessary, but I don't see many of us in a test automation framework write comments for every method, but it's quite necessary. It should explain the why rather than what the code is doing. So you need to explain your code when you actually comment it out. And ChatGPT does it nicely. So I asked ChatGPT, hey, can you help me write a Selenium Java code? And that's what it gives, right? You see how neatly the comment is there for every line of code? I wish our test code looks like this, but I know we don't write it like that. So go back, think about it, and that's something that you want to do. Law of Demeter, which goes back to our, in layman terms, the law says, the one that we have told since childhood, don't talk to your strangers. And that's what law of Demeter says, right? So only talk to immediate friends and don't talk to your strangers. And that's what, so consider class A, B, C as different classes, and you could read it for yourself and how it should not be and how it should be. Be a friend of A, CSC is a stranger to A. And a classic example could be page object, which encapsulates the detail of web page and components it represents. Code review, well, how to make a good code review? Well, I don't want to talk about it because the only metric we will get is WTFs. But again, the TLDR would be is the code clean? That's what we try to arrive at, and does it make really sense? So this is also a funny thing, like no matter how much criteria you know, as Jeff would say, someone else will always know more than what you know. So stop finding everything as a hammer, because there is a saying, if the only tool you have is hammer, everything that you'll treat is a nail. So go with an open mind and contribute to code review sessions and try to understand that this is happening for a betterment of the whole thing. Characterization test, this is quite interesting because how many of you used to work with legacy code, like probably code that is written 15, 20 years ago? Quick show of hands. Quite a few? Okay. So legacy code is the one that is very tricky because you will not know what the code does, but you have to test against it. So that's what it's called, characterization. So writing an automated test to describe and fix an existing code is called characterization test, and this is a model that is used to write for legacy code. I have a story to it. I'll be happy to talk about it when we find in a hallway track. But so just think about characterization test as a strategy to work with the legacy code. From a test execution aspect, it's quite straightforward. I'll quickly rush through. We have parallel execution, we have continuous monitoring, we have test reporting and logging, and then avoid cleverness. I want to emphasize more on avoid cleverness because that's what is more important, because I'm sure you have seen this a lot. Avoid sequential testing, try to parallelize your test so that you get a faster feedback in time. And continuous monitoring, we have this, how many of you have this sort of a setup at your workplace? We had this sort of work. I used to work for IAG back in Sydney, where we had this sort of a setup. Whenever the red light goes, they will only point at the automation team or the quality team. That's a terrible thing, right? Because we say quality is everyone's responsibility, and they will, hey, your test script has failed. So that's the perception. So the perception should be application has gone wrong, should be the perception, not the test script has failed. And that perception has come up because tests are flaky, right? And that's something that we should go and change it, and which is very, very much a tough job to do. And test results. So don't keep test results to yourself. Share it. I've seen people using, creating a Slack hook, sending test results or sending emailable reports. A lot of those strategies are available, so try to use that. Sharing artifacts will really help you. And avoid cleverness, and this is the most important thing of today's talk in mind. Writing code is as good as creating a craft or an art, right? Creating code should not emphasize that you're clever enough than anyone else in your team. That's what a message that I want to leave with. Avoid cleverness. As the saying goes, the cleverest solution to a problem is actually the simplest one that just works. So just try to follow that. So with that, we have covered the authoring, maintenance, review, and test execution. I hope that gave a good insights about the complete clean coding. So let's together craft a future where the code we write is efficient and enduring, because in the world of test craftsmanship, we understand that test code is every bit as good as production code. How nice, I just read that, right? Because I couldn't memorize. So that's a code that I try to think a lot and write about it. So we say test code is as good as production code, which means we have to look forward to maintaining that code quality as well. With that, thank you very much for listening to my talk. My name is Manoj Kumar, and I lead the developer relations at Lambda Test. And you could talk to me anything about basketball, gaming, MotoGP, DevOps, accessibility, and different things. Thank you for listening to my talk.